Hey team, welcome back to another great episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader Podcast. This is your host, Mark Jewell, and today I am joined by Kurt Grimm. He's the CEO, founder and CEO at NutraDrip. Welcome to the show, man. Good to have you on.
Hey, great to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in and see what we can get into today. First question up, Kurt. Everybody gets this one. What does it mean for you to be intentional?
I think for me, it's doing the hard things that maybe aren't natural for me. There just seems to be a lot of things in business and leadership that I'm a conflict avoider. So for me to be intentional means that I'm going to step into a conversation that I would otherwise avoid. I'm going to say some things that I probably otherwise would just keep my mouth shut. I'm more of an introvert person. And so for me, I have to be intentional about things that need to be done because it's where I'm at in the company. And so to me, that's really where I go first when I think about being intentional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually a really great answer and a very honest answer, honestly, because I know a lot of us struggle to intentionally step into those things that we don't want to do.
It's just easy to let them lay. And usually when they lay, they get bigger and they get worse. And I've just learned it's better to deal with them up front. I'm not good at it still a work in progress. But when I think about being intentional, it's just something I have to work on a lot.
Yeah. Well, one of our D's in the definition of intention or intentional leadership is deliberate. Like it has to be deliberate in order for it to be intentional. That's the first one. And so the first quality or characteristic, if you will, of intentional leadership is it's got to be on purpose. It's got to be deliberate. And when it's the thing that you would most likely punt often, right? The thing I want to give to someone else or not have to do at all. And I got to step into it. So it's a great answer. Talk to us a little bit, man. Give us an update on NutraDrip. Kurt Grimm, give us some background, help us understand what are you about, what's NutraDrip about, and we look forward to learning a little bit about the business.
Sure. So grew up on a family farm here in Northeast Kansas and still part of that family farm. There's 5 boys in the family and 2 of my brothers farm. 2 of us are doing NutraDrip, and then I have another brother that is a pivot dealer. So we have drip irrigation and pivot irrigation on our farm. So have an very active farm, and we kind of use it as a research base to test things out and to prove out concepts. Cool. My dad was an entrepreneur, so he always had a new idea. One of the things that we did when I was in high school is we had greenhouses with hydroponic tomatoes. And really? If you know anything about how hydroponics are grown, you feed the plant through the water. Mm-hmm. And so in 2012, when we put in our first drip system, it was kind of an aha moment of, here's what I used to do in a greenhouse. Those greenhouses are now full of flowers and bedding plants and things like that. We don't do tomatoes anymore. But I could take those concepts that I had learned in the greenhouse and apply them to the field. And we're still learning that. Mm-hmm. But in general concept, it kind of evolved from a farm to a greenhouse business. And now we also have the drip irrigation business, which involves agronomy and how to manage water and how to manage nutrients and all those things.
That's really cool, man. I love it. That's a great story of how you guys got into it. Great backstory and a great background. So what we have in common would be entrepreneurial fathers. And so we were in the shiitake mushroom business for like 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the old man rented a grade A dairy barn that was no longer operational. And so it was insulated and metal sides, all the way around. It was still in pretty good shape. And so we filled in the gutters and we built all these racks, and we would get these sawdust blocks that were inoculated with the shiitake mushroom spawn. And he made it into a climate controlled environment. So you could raise or lower the humidity in this place to get it to the perfect temp and humidity for raising mushrooms. And that's what we did for a long time. It was like 1,500 pounds of mushrooms a week.
Wow. Yeah. I remember delivering tomatoes to the grocery store. That was I was in high school and we were doing that. So it was a fun journey. We were 20 years ahead of our time though. Like that was before local food and fresh food was a thing. And so there wasn't the local demand back then that there is today.
Yeah, I mean now you probably crush it, right? I mean everybody's looking for high quality local stuff,
Right.
Especially eggs, if you can provide as we make this middle of March 2025, the great egg crisis that we've got going on in America. Who'd have thought?
That's right.
Right. And it's wild, like I walk into the grocery store the other day, the lowest price for a dozen eggs was 10.44.
Mm,
Can you
yeah.
imagine? Like we used to sell these things off the farm for like $1 a dozen.
Yeah. My boys have some chickens, and they're still they're having a hard time raising their price above $4. And everybody they're sold out, of course, so that they haven't learned the laws of supply and demand yet.
You
They'll
gotta
teach them.
start jacking that up. You come into Pittsburgh, North Carolina. I promise you're getting at least 7.
Right.
Oh man. Well, so how big is or how many people do you have working at NutraDrip? Tell us a little bit of that, a little bit about your team and how many folks you got working there.
Yeah, so we're currently between 35 and 45. We have a lot of seasonal
Cool.
help that comes in and out on the NutriDrip side. And then we still have the landscape greenhouse business, which is another 20 to 30, depending on the
Oh well.
season as well. So
Yeah, there's quite a few.
yeah,
Quite a few.
it's been a challenge, growing up on a farm. I didn't go to college, didn't get formal training for what I'm doing. And so to learn that as we have grown has been a challenge, which I think really going back to the intentional part.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those skill sets they don't teach in college anyway. It's though you just have to learn by doing sometimes.
Mm-hmm. 100%. You got to learn by doing. We saw a speaker at FarmCon talk about. He was a former head of innovation at Disney, and one of the things he talked about is the most employable skill sets. And I'll butcher this if I try to say it verbatim, but I know two of the things were communication and creativity.
Yeah, and those are the
Right?
things that AI will never replace. I
You
remember him
can't.
saying that, right? That
Mm-hmm.
AI cannot replace those two things.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. And we were just talking about that with one of our kids. Like, hey, if you can communicate well, we know you're creative, right? I mean, you can write your ticket, but you got to stay on top of the communication.
Hmm.
So, so in a business like that, small business, family owned business, right? We got your brother are involved. I assume from a leadership perspective, you got between the two parts of the business about 50 people. I mean, so within that space, what's culture look like? How intentional is that for you? How on purpose is that for you? How do you guys go about creating it?
Yeah, it's something we've worked on. It is something that we do focus on, and we look at it, especially in the hiring process. Is this person a fit culturally? Because we've gone through the pain of hiring someone that didn't fit,
Mm,
and it ends up you look at their skill set and you look at what's on their resume and maybe what they've done, but if we miss that cultural fit, that can be painful. So it is something that we spend a lot of time on. Um, One of the unique challenges with our team is probably 30% of our team is remote and
mhm,
spread out over 8 different states. And so being able to keep that culture and connection even with a remote team has really kind of added another level of complexity to
for
make
sure.
those people feel connected and make them feel like they're part of the team and part of that culture.
Hmm.
But I think you know obviously we have the statements on the wall that say what our culture is, but to that's easy. That's the easy part,
Hmm.
is to put them on the wall, but to live
Yep.
them and to practice them, to keep them ingrained in people, that's the hard part.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. This continues to be one of the biggest challenges that I know our clients have. Right. I mean, yes, getting people. We can talk about attraction and retention, but B, like once we get them in, like making, yeah, hopefully we got somebody who's a cultural fit, and then keeping them in and keeping them that feeling of connection. And this is the thing that's coming up in a lot of places, amplified since 2020. I will say that, like
Mm,
we got a not only a heavier dose of separation because of the pandemic, but it also became, I think, more culturally acceptable to talk about the disconnection. Like we all sort of, so it seems like we all got permission to sort of talk
mm,
about it. So everybody was already, what that tells me, Kurt, this is my hypothesis. I have no research to back this up, but this is what I think. I think we had already been feeling disconnected. It's
mm,
because in ag, at least, remote work is not uncommon, right?
right.
We've always, like, if you were in sales, at least, whether we're a big ag company or a mid-sized company or a small company, like you were often remote, in Western Kansas working for a company out of St. Louis,
Hmm.
right? That was not an uncommon thing. It has not been for a long time. Um, But maybe what happened is in some of our smaller communities where a lot of our ag employees live, is we stopped hanging out as much, right? And I don't, something
Yeah.
went away, right?
Yeah.
Something went away. Like I know that I'm not getting invited to a lot of barbecues.
Mhm.
Maybe people just don't like me. Right. But
Yeah.
I, and granted, I've changed addresses a lot. So I don't have deep relationships with the people where I live, right? Because I've moved so much. But it's so interesting to kind of think about what's causing this disconnection.
Mhm.
Cause I think you're about the fifth interview in a row that's brought it up.
Yeah. And people are
Interesting.
hungry for those connections, right? They want to
Mhm.
feel connected. And so I think whether that's customers, internal employees, all the above, right? Everybody's longing for that. And so I think, being able to fill that gap or fill that void from a cultural standpoint is so important. And when that misalignment is there, that becomes a big chasm to put a bridge across. So
100%, man. Big time. Big time, big time. Well, talk to us about like, I mean, finding the right kind of talent in a small area, where you're at rural. I'm assuming a bit more rural, or what's it
very,
like where you're at, and how do you find your people?
yeah, I would say most of our people have come through connections. We've hired a lot of folks that started with us maybe on an install crew, or they started with us as a technician and then have grown into sales or grown into leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So we have I would say by and large we have a fairly young team, and then we have developed them into the positions of with more leadership,
Sure.
and and so we target the farm kids, right? We feel like if we can find those folks that have that hunger to serve the ag community, that's been a great fit for our company.
Oh, nice, nice. Targeting them straight off the farm. I like it. Let's get it early.
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
It's becoming more common. I know several cooperatives that I've worked with or spoken with lately, they do the same thing where they'll work with the local ag program, right? The ag ed program or a 4-H program, and they'll identify young people, offer them great opportunities straight out of high school to come and work in every component of the business. And then after, 36 or 48 months, if it feels like a fit, then they get an offer to stay, and they can accept or not accept. But at that point, now you've been fully trained in the agronomic side of things, at least.
Right.
So
I think the other benefit we have is we're a seasonal business like most ag companies, and so we can staff up in the summer, hire a lot of part-time help, a lot of college kids, do a lot of
mhm.
internships, and even some high school kids, and and so to be able to take and use that as a way to, for one, get to know them, are they a fit, and then be able to really press into the ones that we feel like are a good fit, and usually it's a mutual relationship then as we move forward.
Sure thing. Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff, man. I like it. So let's talk a little bit about Kurt and NutraDrip. I mean, you've been, so how old is the business officially?
Officially would be 12 years
So
on
we're
the
about 12
NutraDrip
years in.
side.
So you and I we're in the same. This is the 12th, 13th year now officially of my leadership training and coaching company, and so chances are you've had some ups and downs during that time frame.
For
What's
sure.
what's been the biggest challenge you guys have had to overcome?
I think obviously there's always times of high and low cash flows. The low cash flows are definitely a challenge. But
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the bigger challenges have been the people side of it, right? The hard when somebody's misaligned, for example. You get
Yep.
somebody on the bus that's in the wrong seat on the bus. Those are the ones that just drain the time and energy, because it's such a misfit. And so I think those are the things that are probably the hardest.
Yeah, I agree, man. When you have somebody who's just not a fit, and you haven't dealt with it efficiently up front, it's like those things we were talking about before, the stuff that you didn't want to do. It doesn't age well.
Right. And I'm a conflict avoider, and so I've had to learn that I've got to step into those conversations earlier, because, like you said, they get worse with time.
Hmm.
Um, and so get having those conversations early is so important.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, 100%. And really knowing when, one thing that we implemented in our business, and it worked to help us, quite frankly, avoid what would have been a long term negative solution, is a 90-day trial period. So it's written in the contract at the beginning when you sign on, like we've got 90 days to decide. You get 90 days, we get 90 days. After that, like we'll commit to a 1-year contract or whatever the case may be. Well, we did 1 year a couple years ago. On paper, it looked good, right? Interview looks good. Should be a fit, ag background, et cetera, all the things. And we got in like 70, 75 days in, and my wife and I looked at each other and we make this decision together. But we looked at each other and like, I'm not impressed.
Yeah.
Right. And so, for like, before we got to the 90 days, like, and by the way, it still sucks. Like I like lost half a day's of work, just thinking about having to have this conversation, and you just build up all this anxiety, and the story is in your head, like you just hate to do it. And then finally you just got to rip off the Band-Aid and go. Mm-hmm. And it's never fun. It's never easy, but you know what else is not fun and not easy is all the money and time and stress you lose by not making that decision too.
Right. That's expensive as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Bringing in the young folks. This is something I'm curious about. We didn't talk about ahead of time, but I am curious. What's working for you guys in terms of trying to retain that group? I've had a number of clients or prospective clients I've walked into recently where folks are really struggling. One company had like 5 people between 23 and 27 walk out the door in like 5 weeks. Like one, like after it was like a flu hit the company or something. So interested, anything that you said you're finding them early. So I'm imagining like you find them young and you find, relatively young off the farm, that kind of thing. This may be the kind of thing they think they want to be involved with, but anything you guys are doing that works?
Thinking about the culture thing obviously is number one. I think that's probably the number one reason when it does work and when they do stick, it's because it was a good fit. But I think the other one is giving them maybe a little more rope to run with. It seems like some of the younger ones, at least I'm just thinking of a couple of them on our team in that age group, what they've done really well with is learning as they go. And they've had to stub their toes. That's been a little bit hard to watch. Sometimes we've had to let them do that to learn. Make a few mistakes, make sure it's not too expensive of a mistake. But I would say they don't do well with micromanagement. That's one thing I've learned. And so I think allowing them a little more leeway to be able to make some of their own decisions. And then at the same time, they're going to make mistakes, and just being able to manage that appropriately.
Manage your downside, right?
Yeah. What's that risk?
Manage the risk. Yeah, I think that's wise. I think within as people grow, right? It's within an age or maturity level appropriate sandbox. Yeah. Right. So you think about like when I was going through some pictures yesterday. Yesterday was a 10-year anniversary of my old man passing away. So I was going through some old pictures, right? And I'm looking through, and I saw this I had one of those tractor tire sandboxes when I was a kid, and it was a picture of me sitting in there in the sandbox, and I was like, at that age, you're appropriately skilled to manage about a tractor tire sandbox and nothing more.
Yes.
Right. And then as you age, right, you might be able to get a bigger one. Right. And then, and then you get to go work on the powered equipment, and then you get to go, right. You get to kind of expand it. And I think about people development inside companies the same way. Right. So if I'm a 23-year-old straight out of university, or, a 20-year-old straight out of, community college, or an 18-year-old straight out of high school, like different levels of maturity, different levels of experience based on what their upbringing was like, and so on and so forth. So let's give them activities and tasks that are appropriate for where they're at. Right. Yep. And those ones that are where it's like, hey, there's not a lot of risk in here. Let's let them go. If they screw that up, no big deal. I remember when I was in high school, they gave me a Bobcat and I was working at the dairy farm. Right. And I popped a couple gates. Right. Like yeah. We lost a couple gates. Right. Is it the end of the world? Did I get my butt chewed? Sure, I did. Right. But it was at the end of the world. No, like we can go get new gates. Right. But then, but I wasn't driving the payloader yet.
Sure.
right? And
Yep.
until
Yep.
after like a year, then I got trained on that, right?
Yep.
So we train as we go. So we have to scaffold people's learning, and this is where intentional leadership, Kurt, I think is really tough because you're busy. Like you have other things to do besides design a training program for
Mm-hmm.
new employees, and I just don't see a way around it. Like you either got to do it yourself or you got to outsource it to someone like us. One
Right.
of the two, right? Or deal with the problems that are going to come downstream. One of which will either be mistakes and lost money, lost time, right? Or lost employees, and those are expensive too because when they quit, it's costing you at least half of their salary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So,
For
yeah,
sure.
those are my thoughts. And yes, autonomy, but also with guardrails.
Right. 100%. Yeah. You can't just, yeah.
Right.
Don't want a train wreck here. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yep. Good stuff. What's been one of the biggest wins for you guys over the years?
I think um, we've been able to succeed at a business that's hard. So the business we're in of drip irrigation is one that has primarily been successful in markets like California and Florida, West Texas, definitely
Mm-hmm.
to West Texas. There's a lot of success there, but in the upper Midwest, it's been something that has been highly um, problematic, let's say. And I think we've been able to bring some success to that. And so that feels rewarding that we've got customers that are having success with the things that we do. And so that's been super fun to watch that happen and to watch our customers have success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good. I love it. Super, super good. What from a growth standpoint, what do you read anything, podcasts? What's your go-to in that department? How do you keep expanding the knowledge?
Yeah, I'm an audiobook guy and
Yeah.
podcast. So spend a lot of time on the road, a lot of windshield time. So don't get so much time in a chair to read, but definitely an audio person and love to listen to podcasts and audiobooks.
Beautiful. Any in particular that have been helpful?
Um, I'm a John Maxwell, Dale
Yeah.
Carnegie, How to Win Friends, Influence People. Like that's the first book you got to read when you come work for us.
Yep.
Just some
Nice.
of those foundational basics. Um, how to deal with people, right?
Mm-hmm.
People's where those soft skills are so much they're so much more valuable than some of the hard skills, I feel like.
Yeah, yeah, big time. Well, I tell you what, man, I'm a big fan of John Maxwell. Big fan of Dale Carnegie. All the books. I actually found one time. I have it somewhere. It was my dad's copy of How to Win Friends and Influence People. When
I have
like
my
he went,
grand I have my
yeah,
grandpa's copy. It's I don't know how
yeah,
old it is, but and he was one of my mentors growing up, and so it's pretty special to have that book. It's got to
yeah.
be 70, 80 years old.
Yeah, super
So,
cool. So my dad had a dairy farm in Michigan when he was real young. So he got out of the army when he was like 21, and it was right before Vietnam got going, and then he got into farming. And so he never ended up getting sent to Vietnam. I think because there was a deal like if you were farming, then you
right.
couldn't get drafted or something. And so I don't think that's why he was farming. I think my grandpa wanted to get out of farming and dad wanted to get in. So so it all just sort of matched up time wise. But that's what he was doing. And so he built it was like 120 cow dairy with a double two milking parlor at like 21 years old,
Wow.
solo. Like didn't even have kids yet. Um, and so him and my grandpa worked on that, and eventually he got burned out on the milking. Quite frankly, he just worked himself to the point where he's like, couldn't mentally handle it, and so he sold the cows. But he had started flying. My grandpa was a pilot, and they had an airstrip on the farm, so he started an aerial photography business. And he
Wow.
built up a team of salespeople. And so this is why they had the Carnegie training, was to train the salespeople to go out and sell pictures of people's farms. And that's what he did. So he flew around, took pictures, and then got everybody jazzed up every morning over coffee to go sell pictures to the people he took pictures of yesterday.
Wow. Yes.
So, but yeah, I mean, How to Win Friends, Influence People. It's just like, I mean, if you haven't read it, guys, you should just order a copy now. You can get on Amazon for probably $8, shipped to your house tomorrow. Um, which is one of those classics that really, if you just read that and implemented that in your business diligently, love to hear that you guys have it as a standard. Everybody's got to read it, when they come work here, because it creates a basis for communication, a way to talk.
Right. It does. Yep. Just a lot of fundamental principles in there about how to treat people, what makes people feel valued, and how to connect.
Here's the thing I'm finding so much, Kurt, about intentional leadership in this space. So many guys are just so wound up and going so hard all the time that we've almost, to some extent, we've lost the, I'll just say it, the intention of stopping and just being nice.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like knowing how to be nice, how to, I've got one right now. I'm waiting, on, this is not somebody who, it's a proposal. Right. And we basically, we have gone back and forth now since December, and it's like, we have one conversation and it'll be like, yes, we're making a decision on this by Friday. And this is going to be great. We're so excited to do this. Send us over the paperwork. And I'll send it all over, and crickets. And then a month goes by, and nothing. You follow up, you do your thing, you do your sales thing. Right. And it's nothing's more frustrating than that piece where they're ignoring you. Mm-hmm. Right. Not because, and I don't even think in other cases, I think certain people are just jerks. In this case, not the case, just too busy.
Yeah.
Right. Super nice guy. They're actually a current customer. So this isn't like, we're not, it's just the next level of what we're going to do next. Right. And it's like, man, like just sit down, take 5 minutes, read it through. Right. It's, this many $1,000. Let's go.
Yep.
Pick your options, sign the paperwork. Let's get started. We're ready to rock and roll. Anyway, but I think, that's what happens for a lot of us. What's going on for a lot of people. They're just so busy. And that's what I hear when I get on coaching calls with people. Call someone, man, I'm busy. Calling someone up, how you been? I'm busy. I'm like, listen, busy is not the goal, is it?
Right. It's so difficult to sort out those urgent versus important things. And it is, at least for me, and to be able to delegate those things that are not so important. I think 2 or 3 years ago, I just made myself use that Eisenhower matrix where you put in the urgent versus important. And it really helped clarify, like, what are the things that I really need to focus my time on? And what are the things that I should be delegating? They might look important, but they're really not, or they look urgent, but they're certainly not important.
Yep, absolutely. We just went through this exercise with our Ag Leader Summit guys, which is like kind of one of our group executive coaching programs. And so the assignment for this week is to find 3 things that you can delegate that you're currently doing. 3 things that need to be just deferred that are stressing you out right now, but you just need to communicate that, hey, we're not doing this right now. We're going to do this in 6 months. Defer it. 3 things to defer, and then 3 things to ditch or delete. It's just like we're doing these things. I had a coaching call that I've been doing once a month, and it's not like it was a decent coaching call, but it wasn't setting the world on fire. It wasn't lighting me up. Certainly, and it was from a program that we were no longer supporting, right? So it's the only customer still getting that thing.
Yep.
And I'm like, for what it pays, it's not worth it, right?
Yeah.
And so I cut it, and I was like, well, it's only an hour a month, right? But no, that's 12 hours a year, right? When you start thinking like that's 12 hours a year, right. That I get back in my life, like that actually means something.
Sure.
So
it's more than a day. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, it literally is it's a day and a half of work, right? Well, right. Probably a day plus 2 hours on my time frame.
And I think for founder, at least for speaking for myself, people who start a business and have the role of CEO and founder, like it's even more difficult because we've done all the things, right? Mm-hmm. We were the CFO, we were the technician in the field, we were we did the service work at some point in time, and so we know all of those steps. And so it's so easy And sometimes those are more fun, right? Like
Yeah,
I'd
right.
maybe go work in the field and do something than sit in my office and have a hard conversation. And so
It's a
I
hell of
think
a
it
lot
just
better,
helps.
hell of a lot better than firing someone.
Right. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's especially a struggle for me, because of that and all the past experience. But
Yep.
so important to delegate those things.
Yep. Man, do you know one of my favorite things that I got to do was when I was in high school. I worked on this. It was like a 800 cow dairy, and they used pivots and on some of their acres. And I don't know if this is still the case. It may be completely irrelevant, but the gearboxes would get water in them, and the water
Mm.
had to be drained. Do you
Yep.
guys have
Oh
to
yeah.
deal with
That's
that?
still a
Okay.
deal. Yep.
Yep. So the dirtiest job that I've ever done in my life was going out there, and I got so dirty. I got just covered in that grease and oil and everything. But God, I was just out there playing in the field, man, like getting dirty and having fun. I come home, my mom's like, "What that?" I was happy. I was so
Yeah.
happy after that day, man. It was great.
Fulfilling. Yep.
Yep. Good stuff, man. Well, Kurt, this has been a fun conversation. I think we talked about a lot of things. There's a lot of value if you really go back, rewind this, and kind of listen through it. But any last things you'd love people to know about, your take on leadership and/or NutraDrip, and how do we find out about you?
Yeah. On the leadership aspect, I think it's just have those mentors, right? I think that's so important. It
Yeah.
has been for me. Like have people that can speak truth and be able to show you where those weaknesses are. I think whether that sometimes that can be a book, it can be a podcast, but have people around you that are that are I always like to say I like to hire people smarter than I am, right? Or that are better than I am. And so always having that attitude that I might have the responsibility of leading this company, but I got a lot to learn still. And
Mhm.
so being able to find those people that can speak into my life and into what I'm doing. So I just think that's so important for that leadership role. So yeah, as far as NutraDrip, we're on the web nutradrip.com,
Great.
active YouTube channel, active in social media. So excited to connect with anybody who has interest in irrigation or manure. That's
Come on,
do a
man.
lot of work on with dairy manure and swine manure. So
That's great. Well, we need all of it. And I can only imagine the demand for those things is going to get better. So we wish you the best of luck, and thanks for being on, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you.